Let's try this again. Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I was like, where's my volume? Always check your sound. That's why I always check my sound. How's everybody doing today? Let me check my mic volume. Good. And good. Guys, if you enjoy what I'm putting down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, if you really love it, you can always support through Patreon or PayPal or Super Chat. The thing I want to talk about today is, I know this title is a little weird. I kind of changed what I was thinking as I was thinking it. And there was a lot. There's a thread to it, but it's hard to articulate the thread. But what it boils down to is media and the influence of media on our society to be a watchdog. But in being a watchdog and in actually doing something right, getting across how abysmal and utterly they fail in a normal context. And what I mean by this is I experienced this week from two angles. One is somewhat of an observer, as if I was kind of in a third person just looking down on this. In an odd way, this kind of meta-narrative and a narrative at the same time. This certain experience of outrage at what's taking place. The ripping babies away from their mamas, the ripping babies away from their dads. The agents palling these kids up. In one case, one of the guys that was busted, or the agents, was a pedophile. Think about that shit. They're taking kids away from their parents. And in some of these cases, some of the agents are pedophiles. Not just that, they lost like 1,500 children. They believe those kids, in many cases, went to human traffickers. That was before Trump, by the way. That was before Trump. This is horrendous. A person flees a war-torn country. And whatever that war-torn country is, whether it's drugs, crime, rape, whatever, and they flee crawling with the baby in the bag on the back to the city on the hill. And they've crossed treacherous territory to get from point A to point B because they believe that the kid will have a better life. And Obama and Trump took a policy of trying to deter people from coming to the country. In many cases, even Hillary was advocating sending them back. Well, some of these cases, these people are fleeing death. In Trump's case, he jumps the shark magnificently from the structures that Obama had in place to going so far as to separate thousands of kids from their parents. So not only are they now in an unfamiliar territory, not only did they have to cross horrible terrain, not only did they come from horrible conditions already, now they have this extra scenario of being taken away by some brute and being ripped away from the kid that they love. Yeah, that's an outrage. That's a horrendous thing. The guy started his campaign saying Mexicans were rapists and drug dealers. So you had an idea already on where this was going to go when he got into office. Not to mention, there's this extra thing, this grossness of using this as a bargaining chip, meaning there are real people's lives who are being destroyed by Donald Trump, and he's using it as a bargaining chip. Now, that's one way I experience it. The second way I experience it is this was taking place to a lesser degree under Obama, meaning we've gone from from bad to worse, but they never paid attention to the bad. And why didn't they ever pay attention to the bad? Meaning the media is not this kind of neutral observer. The media is making choices on what they want to see. There's editorial decisions involved in what they want to see. This was an outrage, and the lens did focus on an outrage. But the way the previous president also did was to some degree an outrage. I'm trying to make this point of why does the media look at some things and not others? This was a good outrage. This was something that was actual, real, that the person was doing. Now, I also experienced this from the standpoint that they've tried Trump in Russia for 2 years. That didn't work. Trump and his taxes. That didn't work. Trump, grab him by the pussy and all that. That didn't work. None of that stuff worked. Trump is a bumbling idiot. Trump is a liar. And some of those things are actually true. But none of those things stuck. None of them stuck. Except for this. And even when I look at stuck, it's like, what does it mean to say stuck? Is the person who's out in America pissed off about this? Now, for whatever reason, I felt like there was a certain hysteria that was associated with this particular thing. And I don't mean hysteria as a negative. I just mean hysteria as descriptive. People were pissed off. Yes, some people who were at the airport, some people protesting, they were people who were pissed off. Now, I experience it as this kind of heightened state of people are pissed. But is that really indicative of what the world is? My only experience with the world is, for the most part, the news that I watch, the news that I read. I don't have any real access to what takes place out there beyond the circle of people that are around me and the media to which I find myself. So what's real? Do you understand what I'm saying? I only have the information that's presented to me from the standpoint of what I expose myself to, not necessarily what's indicative of what's real from the standpoint of the public. A poll came out by Rasmussen saying that like 40 or 50% of the public thinks that it's the parents' fault for bringing the kid over, meaning giving Donald Trump to some degree a pass in what's taking place. Those polls tend to trend to the right, so take it with a grain of salt. But that's still a pretty high number. He's ripping kids away from their babies. They're talking about building a concentration camp where they can put families, to store families. Look, my point is, that is somewhat of an outrage. But I don't know what the actual public thinks of it. I only know what the media tells me they think of it. Those things are different. And that's kind of what I want to point my finger at. Donald Trump reversed course. Now, I found Republicans to be stubborn, pugnacious. They would lie in a heartbeat. They would put themselves in a position where they would spin things in Orwellian ways to try to convince people of things that are no way true. We're fighting for freedom. Yeah, freedom for the top 1%. That people were putting money in their pocket. Freedom to pollute the air. Freedom to pollute the water. Freedom to deprive you of your rights, of your health care. Freedom to make your life miserable at the expense of their plutocratic friends in their class. They lie. They spin these fairy tales to some degree. When is the last time you've seen a debate take place in Congress where one side gives this awesome argument, the other side says, you know what, you were right. I changed my position. They don't do that. They tend to take a position and stick with the position, whatever that position is. But in this case, they changed their position. Trump reversed course. Not fully, but he's reversing course on something that he set as a policy, or at the very least that was there, but that he kicked into overdrive as a policy. He changed course. Public pressure. And let's be honest, media pressure. There were a certain section of the population that was angry at this. There was a certain part of the population that just didn't like this. But you had one part that was animated and pissed off about this. That was not the entirety of the society, but it was large enough of a move where media clings onto it. The interesting part in this is the choice of media to cling on to this. Because once they cling on to this, they're jumping from one location to the next, focused on it, in depth. They're trying to get into the camps. They're all over the place. It's media the way you would expect media to behave under normal circumstances. And they're going after this story. You have babies. Let's get a picture of a crying baby. Yes, we got a picture of a crying baby. Put the camera in her face. Put the camera in her face. Would you like some candy? I'm trying to make this point that they've been so animated and all on the story, which is kind of what I want to get at. Donald Trump reversed course because of the pressure that was affiliated with media. Yes, there were people out there, but I don't necessarily know if those people represent a large majority of the overwhelming country. It doesn't matter. You got enough. Media clings onto it. for their own reasons. I think they hate Trump. They were looking for all sorts of things. They found something that worked, and they hammered it home. And he changed course. This is a win for media to some degree. And you can make an argument that it's a win for public, because the public, you can make, this kind of back and forth that allowed this to go through, where the public was pushing for it, the media was pushing for it, and government changed course. This gets across how often media fails, how horrible mainstream media is. It is a horrible, horrible institution. Billions of dollars. And what do you get to see? Media is supposed to hold government accountable. I pat them on the back for this. They actually held government accountable in an awful, god-awful policy where they were ripping babies away from their mamas. No, they didn't do it on the last president, but whatever. They did it on this president. And yeah, the camera lens is not objective. They hate Trump, so they found something that accused for Trump, but it was real. Usually, there's a collusion between media and politics. They want access, they want nice publicity, and you exchange those two things. And we pretend as if the money doesn't do anything to the politician. And we dumb down the public. Now, they've done stories on Trump and Russia for the past 2 years. Media often dumbs down the public. They don't talk about necessarily real things. What I mean by that is, with the hysteria that media took on this, it is a horrible, horrible tragedy to take a child away from their mama, especially when they're fleeing some kind of war zone. Is it not any less of a tragedy for a person to lay sleeping on the street in the snow? Maybe in the rain. Sleeping on the street at all. If you were walking by a person that was sleeping on the street, shivering in the snow, would you feel some kind of way about the fact that this person, this man, woman, or child, is sleeping in the snow? Would it bother you? Would it dig into you? Then why does it dig into people in the abstract? I think most people would say yes. You would have some right-wingers who wouldn't necessarily care, but I don't really care about them. I'm talking about the majority of the population that is empathetic and to some degree cares. Why is that less of a tragedy? You talk about the homeless population in New York. You talk about it in California. You talk about it in Seattle, Washington. Explosions in the number of people who are homeless in these states. So much so they're intruding into the political debate from the standpoint of the politicians. In the Ocasio-Cortez debate, it showed up in that debate. When I was in New York, that was one of the things that the cabbies talked about. How do you deal with that stuff? Oh, geez, I lost my place. I'm sorry. With the rents. Jesus Christ, I lost my place. Yeah, I lost my place. Jeez. Look, my basic point is this. When media gets... Oh, I know what it was. It is just as bad for a person to sleep on the streets. That's the kind of point I'm getting at. This idea that a person not having food to eat, not being able to get health care, the woman who was kicked out of the healthcare, out of the hospital, essentially wandering the streets without health care. Do you honestly believe that woman is the only woman being kicked out of health care? The person who's being crushed by college loan debt, $50,000 at 21 years old and not being able to get a job. I'm saying all of these things are tragedies. The person sleeping on the street, to me, is an abomination. That is a society that has turned its back on its fellow people in that society. People being pulled away, meaning the immigrant thing, is chaotic. It's a catastrophe, yes. The person sleeping on the street is also a catastrophe, yes. The person being locked up for pot is a catastrophe. They're putting people in cages, yes. I'm saying we have all sorts of catastrophes in our society. Media has the capacity to focus a lens on any catastrophe that it wants and blow it to epic proportions to generate a certain amount of hysteria about it. Good hysteria, by the way. It doesn't do it. Why does it choose on one and not the other? And the fact that it chooses one and not the other is not an excuse to say no one is going to be interested in it. They create the interest. They generate the interest. and they also generate energy from the standpoint of the political class. Right now, the Poor People's Campaign is going all across the United States. And many of these places, they're getting arrested. Reverend Barber got arrested. What is his name? For the Bernie Sanders thing. Nick Brana gets arrested. Some of the state houses being shut down because of it. Nothing. My wife comes in and says, I didn't know anything about it. She says, look, if the media can gin up this hysteria, maybe we should start talking about a poor people's thing. Maybe we should get people riled up about stopping the homeless. I mean, that's what we should do. And I say, for the last few months, there's been a poor people's campaign that's been running all across the United States, in some cases shutting state houses down. She's like, what? I had no idea. Exactly. Occupy Wall Street tried to draw attention to the thing. They tried to ignore that it existed, and then in many cases talked about it in this kind of derisive way, as opposed to people being pissed off and sick of the situation to which they found themselves. Media chooses to some degree. People choose, yes. And sometimes you can get enough of a movement, enough of a crowd that forces their hand and forces them to pay attention. That's what Reverend Barber is trying to do right now. But in some cases, when it's politically advantageous for them, and by politically advantageous, I mean, look, it helps them. Their job is to get eyes on screens. And that's what they're trying to do. Eyes on screens. Asses in seats. They've been trying to get Trump one way or another from the time he's gotten into office. At least on this one, I agree with him that he's a bad guy. The other stuff, maybe not so much. But on this, I agree with him. I'm just making the point that you have that lens and that power to hold government accountable across the board. The fact that you did it on this only highlights the fact on how much you fail on the other parts. So, let's see. Oh, we have people here. All right. Balthazar, the longest filibuster. Oh, yeah, I saw that one. It's all diversion. Look at these crying babies while they slash Social Security, Medicare, and then Trump fixes the problem and celebrates as compassionate hero after screwing you. Obama did the same with drones. Republicans are trying to slash Social Security and Medicare in that last budget. $4 trillion that they're trying to take out of the budget, out of healthcare, Social Security. But they're Republicans. I don't know what people expected. You put a Republican in that office. Yes, you put Donald Trump because Donald Trump whispered sweet nothings in your ear. I have no idea why you believed him with him running under the Republican banner. I have no idea. He's a billionaire. Why on earth are you believing him? Lisa Hauserman, Piano Man Vagabond is a good... Yeah, Danny Knapp, and that works today. That's why we must support these other channels reporting on the Middle East. Black Power. What's happening, Black Power? Piano Man, Lisa, that military budget is $716 billion, was supported 67% of so-called progressive Democrats. Believe it or not, that military budget goes beyond $716 billion. There are $21 trillion in unsubstantiated costs going all the way back from, I think it was like 1998 to like 2015. In 2015 alone, there were $5 trillion in unsubstantiated charges. If you remember, day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld comes on and says, we have lost track of $3.2 trillion. Think about that number. That number is monumental. The amount of money that is unsubstantiated on the military could literally pay off the debt. Could literally pay off the national debt. It's amazing. Most Americans are idiots and are like turkeys voting at Christmas, or in your case, Thanksgiving. Look at the schmucks you elect. Yeah, look, the thing that this has made me realize is that the government is fickle. I know it seems strong. I know the edifice seems strong, but the edifice seems strong because there's a collaboration between media and government, meaning the narrative that you get from power, in this case, this thing that's explaining the truth. It seems to be above you, and it seems to be this thing that's proclamating, almost like the word of God of sorts. In collusion with the governmental apparatus, it gives it a certain amount of legitimacy. The thing is, the media is supposed to keep them accountable. They're not supposed to be in collusion with these guys, and yet they are. So the moment that public will changes, it changes, if that makes sense. Like the media is there to corral public perception, public will. The moment that public will changes, then the political system has to change. Either you're going to mow down your population with large amounts of police and guns and bullets and tanks, or your society changes. This, if nothing else, the immigrant thing demonstrates that. It demonstrates that in real terms. When have you known Republicans to have turned tail in any scenario? Only when they believe that their seats are on the line and they believe they're going to be taken out on a rail. Only when they're scared of losing their seats. Same thing with Joe Manchin. When Joe Manchin went to TYT, he didn't go to TYT because he was scared of Paula Swearengin. He went because he wanted to expose himself to progressives. He went because he was terrified of losing his seat. That's when they show up. What these Republicans were scared of, and the reason they're doing this immigration bill, is because they're terrified that there's enough of a public will that they're going to be dragged out of their seats. That's what they think. And that should be the position that they're in. The point I'm getting at is the public has that power to do that with a host of issues. It doesn't do it. For whatever reason, a baby being taken from its mama is horrific and catastrophic as that is. The toll that it takes on a human being is immense. But so is a human being sleeping on the street. Our society, in the same way, it should be unacceptable for a person to be ripped away from their mom from a standpoint of immigration. It should also be unacceptable for any person to sleep on the street. Why do you want that as a society? Why do you want that to be part of your society? You're the richest society on the planet. You can afford it. Here's the secret. They've drained public services so much. They've squeezed government so much that oftentimes what gets missed is the ability for people to get health care. You drain services to the VA. You drain services from the standpoint of healthcare, education in these various states. That burden comes back to us. We end up paying that. Meaning that's more money out of your wallet that goes to education, that goes to healthcare. That's on us. As a society, as a collective, we can come together and make decisions democratically on the things that we want to support for each other. We can do that. We are the workers in this society. If we don't work, it all grinds to a halt. This idea that the plutocrat, for whatever reason, is worth $20 million at a particular company is nonsense. He makes that money purely on the back of the laborers that are in that position that allows him to make that cash. Even if he came up with the ideal, that idea is nothing without those people making that ideal come to fruition. It is insanity that these people are allowed to have this much while everyone else have so little, and while these places throughout the country get starved for resources. I mean, part of the reason why the homeless population is what it is in California. I understand they raise taxes in California and everything else. And I also understand California has a weird system in regards to how they are supposed to fund education and everything else. But here's the thing. We have healthcare on the backs of our companies. Other companies around the globe don't necessarily have to deal with that burden. That's something that all of us should deal with just as a collective. Education. $50,000 on the backs of the people in our society. That money is not going into houses. That money is not going necessarily into the things that they may want, like vacations or just things for them to make a life, even getting married later in life. We are draining the lifeblood of our society out, and we're taking that and sending that money to the top. 95% of the resources under a Democratic president, Democrats, lefties, supposedly, quote unquote, left, are supposed to be the release valves on the society, meaning the greed and the hubris of a capitalistic society are supposed to have the release valve of a liberal class, in the way Chris Hedges puts it. Well, what happens when that gets blunted? When there is no release valve, where you have capitalist A and capitalist B, and both are in it to essentially go towards their own best interests, meaning fuck the society itself. We're in it to get what we want. And now we will use this language of feel your pain, of this thing of we're going to fight for the poor and the middle class, the Joe Crawley language that he's using in the debate. But the reality isn't what they do. You've seen them over the past 30, 40 years, going back to Bill Clinton, and some people even make the argument going back to Jimmy Carter. Do you honestly believe that these new Democrats, the third way Democrats, the Obamas, the Clintons, they represent your interests? Do you honestly believe that in a single party you can have plutocrats and labor? And you honestly believe that with plutocrats giving all of this money, gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of money to these politicians, that those politicians are going to pay attention to the interests of labor? They haven't yet. They haven't yet. What I'm telling you is the politicians lean in the direction of the people who are giving them cash. The fact is, unions have been beaten down for the past 50, 60 years. Part of that is because they didn't necessarily have a partner in the political class. Ultimately, what you had was a Republican class that was beating the shit out of labor, and the Democratic class that would just be apathetic. And making the point that you have dollars or pitchforks. Unions have been decimated. Where are your pitchforks? All you have is dollars. You have this resurgence of populism all throughout the country. And the Democratic Party, after losing 1,000 seats, after losing the House, Senate, Supreme Court, after losing a cornucopia of loss, after losing this much, the public itself screaming that we want something else, at the height of their lungs screaming that we want something else, purely, that's explained purely just in the failure. The failure itself gets across a certain message. You're not liked. What you are is not indicative of what the public wants. You're being dismissed. They don't respond to this in a sane and rational way. They respond to this as somebody who's losing their jobs. And they say, we have a point of view of the world that we would like to continue to espouse. And so we are going to choose who we want. In which case, the DCCC, just like the Democratic Party did under Sanders and Clinton, put their thumb on the scale. All throughout the United States, put their thumb on the scale. In some cases, telling people to get out the race. It's amazing. They're supposed to be there for the will of the public, not the other way around. Part of the reason they can do that is because they've gotten to the point of believing that the public has nowhere else to go. And they know that the public believes that. And for as long as the public believes that, and they believe they can get away with that line of logic, they're going to get away with that line of logic. They're going to exhaust that to the degree that they can exhaust that. My reasoning for taking this position of solidarity of no is not because I necessarily love the idea of Republicans winning. It's that I don't necessarily see anything changing under the model that we currently have. We have this weird situation where the members of the party are scared and so terrified that they're willing to put any Democrat in. Think about that. They're so terrified of what's across the aisle that they've been cowed by the political system, not the other way around. It's not, I'm excited about this politician and I want to put this politician in office because I want him to do good things. It's, I am terrified of that other guy and I just need to put this guy in to be a blocker. That blocker who's going into office is going to also do things. It's probably going to be things you don't necessarily like. Until we get to the point of being willing to say, I am not voting for you because you're not representing my interests. And be loud about it. Be known about it. To be fully aware that they are going to lose each and every time they put somebody up who doesn't represent your interests. You're trying to get down to a fundamental basis of reality. Of saying, this is the line where I'm willing to go and no less. I have a red line from the standpoint of what I believe humanity should exist on. And if you're not willing to back that up, then I'm not willing to give you my vote. One of two things happens. Either they lose or they change. They lose or they change. Lisa Hauserman, how can we vote people out when the voting system is so fucked up? So that's the other thing, fair elections. So there have been a lot of people who are working on this thing of election integrity. I got to be honest, I don't necessarily know how far along they are with it. I know Tulsi Gabbard has put through a bill where she's trying to get paper ballots. I definitely support that. Maine has just put in ranked choice voting. I mean, some places are trying to make differences. Some. And ever since the last election, they've been screaming at the top of their lungs about the election system being hackable. So now they want to do something about it. It's amazing. Now it's hackable. When we were saying before, nobody paid attention. I'd be in favor of removing children from the care of the Clintons and the Trumps. Maybe they have a chance of becoming decent human beings. Speaking about that, let me read the other one. I'll get back to that. How many of those media organizations also call for the solution, the abolishment of ICE and the DNS? It's just the depth of national insecurity. They don't bring that up because that doesn't matter. What they care about is the splashy story. You must understand, these are profit-making enterprises. In such, they need to get people to put eyes on the screen. That's what they want, eyes on the screen. They're now in competition with YouTube also, meaning they're in competition with the internet for views. So it's not just they have a monopoly on visibility anymore. Well, how do you do that? When you have a debate, it makes it sound like a football game. You boil it down to the least common denominator, to dumb it down. You don't necessarily have these certain conversations. Like it's done in a way. It's just done in an odd way. The way they go about their conversations, even the debates, they trend towards the right. There's a certain perspective associated with the conversations that they have when they're on those debate stages. And I'm talking about the general election. I'm not talking about the other part. I suspect if Sanders was on stage, that conversation would trend in a different way because you would force the conversation in a different way. But if you have essentially a right-winger and somebody who's off the fucking political spectrum, then you get someone that trends to the right. Look, the media, they don't care about that. Like, they care about the candy, if that makes sense. The thing that's quick, not necessarily the substance. They care about, look at this baby being taken. Oh my God, it pains my emotional center. I'm angry at this. I'm outraged at this. And they're like, yes, we put asses in seats. I strongly suspect that they've been going after Trump for the last 2 years. They may actually see Trump as a menace. They may actually see him as something fundamentally different. He governs like a regular Republican would govern. They keep saying he's different. He's not. He's the same old Republican. He's just doesn't hide it well. That's all. Mike Pence hides it better. They don't deal with solutions. They don't even deal with the reasons for the problems. Like, they would never go into this thing of the Black Ops projects in South America. They would never touch it. They would never touch it. They would just say, these people fleeing in this country, look at what Donald Trump is doing, how horrible is this? That's it. They may use ICE and say, look at what ICE is doing. But they're not necessarily going to say, abolish ICE. Those are governmental services, and they don't necessarily trespass on this idea of governmental services in that way. They're not watchdogs. They're arms of the government for all intents and purposes. They may call themselves different. They may call themselves separate. Whatever. They tend to function as arms of the government. I can't tell if that's right. Also, this thing of the Clintons, the kids. So, do you remember in WikiLeaks when the Clinton Foundation emails came up? Chelsea was asking questions. I remember this. This was fascinating. Chelsea Clinton was like, hey, it looks like we're using money in an odd, inappropriate way. One of the people in the Clinton thing writes an email saying, you guys need to get Chelsea in line. Otherwise, some of the money that she's talking about went towards her wedding. Like, they were essentially threatening her in some weird way. But Chelsea was essentially asking, it looks shady, what's taking place with the money here? So maybe she's not horrid and scarred over as a human being like her mama. Balthazar, it's illegal in 22 states to take a photo of your ballot. We deserve receipts of our ballots as proof. Debbie does ballots again. Garnome, I couldn't agree with you more. Propaganda, new WikiLeaks is out. I'm gonna have to check that out. Black Power. Rachel Maddow gets $30,000 daily. Think about that. What does your world look like with $30,000 a day? My wife and I, when I left my position as a software engineer, for the first 10 years after school, I was ill, so I was out of the workforce. It took me a while to finish school. Once I got well enough and I started in the job market, it took me a while, but I eventually became a software engineer. Going from little to nothing to making relatively decent money, it's a mass disparity between those two things. There's a big disparity in the lifestyle. Like your ability to just process your day, your ability to go from day to day to day to day, when you have to kind of focus on just your basic needs of survival as opposed to being in a situation where you don't have to do that. One is something always pinging in your brain, the other not so much. Living $30,000 a day has you living a fundamentally different life than the majority of people on this planet, let alone in this country. $30,000 a day. That's amazing. That number is profound. 0-0. And Rachel Maddow cried. She wept. Rachel Maddow wept. Chelsea is married to Soros' nephew or godson, Darren Levy. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Rachel Maddow is paid to spin and propagandize huge paycheck in exchange for your humanity. Let's make an exchange. You give me your integrity, and I'll give you $30,000 a day. Okay. Seems like a good deal. Seems like a good deal. The funny part is, when a Republican president, I think, you know what I think it is? Some of you may disagree with me on this. When you guys came into your political awakening, Rachel Maddow was in office and Bush was in office. And she comes across as a lefty when she's hitting George Bush. She hits him. You could be as lefty as you want to be when you're hitting George Bush. Then Obama gets in office. Then Trump gets in office. And what I think you see is a disparity between how she engaged with Trump versus Bush versus Obama. And you say to yourself, wait a minute. Obama was doing very similar things as Bush. Why on earth are you harping on Trump to this degree when you didn't harp on Obama to this degree? Now, to be fair, I suspect this has more to do with the fact that she's just a Democrat, and that regardless of who is in that office, she would punch them. She's just looking for something to hit them with. In Trump's case, there's the extra burn because she feels like she's been cheated by quote-unquote Russia. I gotta be honest. I don't care that they think they've cheated by Russia. They cheated Sanders. I don't understand why Hillary supporters think Bernie supporters should give two shits about the fact that they believe they've been cheated. I don't believe they've been cheated at all. They've manipulated the media to some degree to spin this Russia stuff up and have no proof of the fact that it's taken place. So, yeah, $30,000 a day. That's amazing. 1% start at $330,000 a year. The 0.1% start at $1 million a year. 0.01% start at $10 million a year. Maddow's between 0.03%. There is no way she could understand $30,000. Just think, some people live off of the amount that she makes in one day. In one day. And by the way, I'm not trying to take Maddow down. My issue in this is, under normal circumstances, when we're talking about workers and everything else, you have this odd argument of people saying, I should earn $10 million a year, I should earn $20 million a year, working at a company, while at the same token paying their workers shit and piss. Jeff Bezos has $130 billion. Think about that number, $130 billion. While at the same token, many of his people are working on food stamps. The reason they're on food stamps is because he has $130 billion. If Jeff Bezos had, let's say, $100 billion and give some of their money back, maybe those people wouldn't necessarily need to be on food stamps and maybe they could have a decent living. This doesn't fully apply to Maddow on this. I mean, yeah, she's getting paid ridiculous amounts of money, and I think the argument people make is there is no way she can understand the lives of other people in this country, which is why she fundamentally missed why Hillary Clinton lost that race. I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes to the point of she's a Democrat. When Donna Brazile came out with her piece, Keith Olbermann comes out and says Donna Brazile has just lost her career. Think about that. I mean, that's a profound statement that he's saying. Not so much for what he's saying, but for the things that he's not saying. He's not saying, oh my God, they cheated Sanders. Olbermann didn't care about whether or not they cheated Sanders. The only fig leaf that Democrats had was, well, we don't fully believe it. I mean, we don't. But when Donna Brazile comes out, she tells you it is true. Your response is not a cognitive breakdown. Oh my God, I didn't believe the party could do such a thing. They cheated somebody in the party. My ideals have been broken and crushed. I don't know what to think of myself anymore. My God has fallen. That wasn't, no. She just lost her career. Their party affiliation is their career in an odd way. Their party is not necessarily what they do from the standpoint of the ideals and stuff that you espouse. It's also what they do for a living. Working on MSNBC, she has a job to do. That job is to be a Democrat. I don't think this is entirely the 30,000. I think part of this is also her political affiliation and her platform on that channel within the context of that political affiliation. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Piano Man, Democrats, when they were caught with their pants down, just said, we must look ahead and move forward instead of owning their corruption. And you know, the sad part is, owning the corruption is the only way forward. This is kind of my point. Solidarity of no. You can't reward bad behavior in this way. You can't. You have a party that outright cheated one of the other party members. A member of that party who was head of the organization at the time comes out and says, yes, they cheated. Not just cheated. The person who was running in the race funneled money, laundered money through the state organizations back into her campaign. This is corruption on a magnificent scale. And if people just kind of pay attention to this in a way that nothing to see here, folks. What do you mean nothing to see here? You just cheated a guy and you guys laundered money. And you guys are saying there's nothing to see here. You can point at Trump and the Republicans all you want. This is some massively corrupt shit that's taking place. And still they say, nothing to see here. We must look forward because Donald Trump is going to eat babies if we don't let him, if we don't do anything about it. On this issue, they believe they have a winning coalition to attack Trump. People like Peter Dow has come out saying, we must keep the fight up. Who is we? Who is we? There's no we. There's no we. I'm angry at what's taking place at the border with the babies, but Obama was doing it too. So who is we? You've just jumped on board this bandwagon. Who is we? 3 million immigrants were deported under Obama. Who on the planet is we? Who is the resistance in this case when the resistance was also doing the same things? Who is we? I don't know who we is. Rachel was aid the same $30K long before the election to convince us that she was a true progressive. Lisa, I think what it was, I don't think it was the $30K. I think what it was, Bush was in office. It's a comparative analysis. Like, if Tom Perez was standing beside George Bush and they were talking, Tom Perez would seem more to the left. If you put Bernie Sanders beside Tom Perez would look like a corporate shill. Now, did Tom Perez change? No. Did his comparison change? Yes, because you was able to see him in a different light, in a different comparison. By putting somebody side by side in a comparative analysis, you're able to shed light on them in a way that you couldn't necessarily see it before. It's like shedding a spotlight. It's like hitting an electron off of an item in order to see what's in the item, or like plunging to atoms together and seeing what's in the atom. It gets you a better view of what's in the person when you can give a comparative contrast. This is what I think took place. Maddow could be that way because the person she was hitting was George W. Bush. He invaded a country, killed a million people, not to mention the drone wars and everything else. How difficult is that? How difficult is that to be a lefty in that case? But in this case, Yeah, how difficult is that to be a lefty when you're up against Bush? The problem is when Obama takes office, drone wars still going on, the immigration stuff still going on. Obamacare still allowed rates to go spiking through. You would have thought that you would have hit Obamacare over and over and over again on this thing of public option. But whatever. I just make the point that she's a Democrat. She is going to toe the Democratic line, whatever the Democratic line is. There may be slight deviations depending on, something that she may feel overly strongly about. But all things being equal, her, Tom Hartman, Lawrence O'Donnell are going to toe a particular line. See if I'm wrong. If you look at the shows, I would wager to you that there's a thread going through all of them where what they're saying is for all intents and purposes almost the same. And it's going to coincide with whatever Democrats are saying. No, the dog is not named Hillary. The dog is named Pitsu. He's a pit bull Shih Tzu mix. He has these baby legs, but he thinks he's bigger than what he is. Obamacare is going up faster than inflation to Biden. That's kind of this is kind of my point. Like, people, they tend to try to find refuge in Obamacare, and I try to make the point that you took a heavy lift in order to get Obamacare passed, and you didn't do it right. So the thing that Democrats are going to point to, or Republicans point to, is this what they mean by collective action, that platypus Obamacare? Look at the rates. The rates that my wife and I pay are insane. They're utterly insane. And so I've said before that the Democratic Party, what it is a debasement of the left. Meaning what the left actually is gets debased by the Democrats taking on the label that they are somehow actually the left. So you create a platypus healthcare plan that was essentially Romney Care, and you call it a left plan. It's not a left plan at all. That's a right-wing healthcare plan. And it's doing what I would expect a right-wing healthcare plan to do. Explode in price. It's exploding in price. Not to mention, it chained us to those corporations. Those corporations have gotten more power in the healthcare system. They should have gotten less. In fact, he should have gotten rid of them entirely, just let Medicare take over that task. You do not like Tom Hartman. Charles, I love Tom Hartman. I just don't like him when he's doing his Democrat thing. When Tom Hartman is having a history lesson, love him. Absolutely love him. When he's shilling for whatever Democrat is running in an election, not so much. That's why we can't go anywhere from hell. You can't go anywhere from hell. The USA will never get health care, for all big pharma and health insurance companies are filling their pockets for both parties. Well, again, my solidarity of no. Like, they do that if you support Democrats that allow them to do that. I guess I'm trying to make the point. They only can do what you allow them to do. Meaning, what are you willing to support? And what are you willing to say, I'm done on? That's a lot of this is what this boils down to. The public being willing to go along and not hold these people accountable. When they're talking about, hold us accountable, what does that mean? If you're terrified of the Republicans, can you really hold the Democrat accountable if you're so terrified of the Republican? How can you hold somebody accountable when the other guy's a monster? Solidarity of no. The threat of no in and of itself may even bring change. But this idea of getting into the party and then trying to change it, I don't see it. Xavier Foster, it should have called unaffordable mandated insurance. Yeah, they force you to buy health care from a health insurance company. Yeah. Look, it's better than nothing, but then well, wait a minute. You said this was supposed to be health care, and my rates have gone up 50%. That doesn't look like health care. That looks like something, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to say you fixed it, fix it. Do you know, right before that election, I think it was almost like a month before the election, healthcare costs went up like 50% in some places. How do you expect to win an election like that? You pass a healthcare plan. The majority of the people love Medicare. Majority of the people love Social Security because those plans work. Those plans have not been funded enough, but they work. Obamacare, people's rates are still going up. So, all right, I'm going to end this here. my powers are fading on me. We've been here for like an hour talking about it. So, let me make sure I got everybody. Yeah. Baltazar, thanks for the breakdown. 1% thought at $330,000 a year. Wow. When we're talking about this, we're not even talking about the 1%. We're really talking about like the 0.1% or the 0.01%. Like the amount of money. Jesus Christ. It is hard to conceive of that much cash. And yet, here's the thing, man. I always get annoyed when I hear people bash immigrants or bash the poor. Because you try to get across the amount of money that is sloshing through Washington. They spent $1 billion on that last election. Think about that. $1 billion that they could have just burned on the White House lawn. Think of all the things that money could have went for, and they put that money into just convincing people of just lying to the audience in both camps. Trump is a maniac. Trump is evil. Trump is going to eat babies. Trump peed on somebody. Trump got peed on. All this stuff. Just all this insane stuff. Trump did it too. Both did it. Trump took a little bit of time to talk about Make America Great, even though he had no way to do it. But the shittiness of choice that we got in this election was horrendous. It was utterly horrendous. But there's money there. I guess that's my point. There's money there. You have somebody who's at a company making like $10 million. Why is that guy making $10 million and everybody else making shit and piss? There's money there. That guy is making that money on the backs of the workers that are there. I'm making the point to you that there's money there in this society for the society to do the things that it needs to do. Be it healthcare, be it parks, be it child credit, be it a grant to people who need money to raise their kids. Whatever that is. Be it a federal jobs guarantee. Whatever that is. There's money there to do it. You just need the political will to pull it off. That's all. You just need the political will. The money is there. We're talking about ungodly sums of money that slosh through this society. And the fact is, the people who build the society, who keep the lights running, who keep the plumbing going, who do the work, who fix your coffee, who, clean your apartment, all those things. Those are the people who run and make the society work. Those people are no less deserving of healthcare, no less deserving of an education. They help this society in innumerable ways. In fact is, if they didn't exist, we would not have a working society. This idea that somebody should get $10 million and that other people should get minimum wage is nonsense to me. I don't understand how that works. That person, that plutocrat, doesn't exist without a lot of people's backs to get that money off. So there's money there for anything that we need to do in our society. Do you know we raised the military budget by $80 billion on a whim? $80 billion. That sends every boy and girl to school that wanted to go to school, that if they wanted to go to university. If we wanted to have a federal jobs guarantee, cut the military budget not even in half, or cut the military budget in half, you could pay for it. Believe it or not, the military budget is literally just a jobs guarantee. That's all it is. We're giving a bunch of money to a bunch of corporations in these various districts. Money is being siphoned off to the plutocrats at the top, with a little bit going into the services and everything else. I'm making a point to you that we have cash in the society. You're being told that we're completely broken, we can't do anything, and yet $80 billion upgrade for the military. Do you know that's more than Russia pays for its entire military? We spend $716 billion. In 2015, there was, $5 trillion with a T of unreserved or of unknown costs in the budget. Essentially, they weren't able to line up $5 trillion in expenditures. Think about those numbers. Like, those numbers are amazing. $20 trillion in debt. We don't have high-speed rail. We don't have healthcare for everybody in the country. I asked somebody, I remember having a conversation with a right-winger, and I said, if we were $20 trillion in debt, but you had healthcare, you had high-speed rail, you had college for your kids where you wouldn't have to pay $50,000 in debt, would you think different about some of the ideas that you have? He says yes. Probably yes. Because in that case, it's Yes, we're in debt, but look at what we have for the debt. You have something for the expenditure. In this case, the money has been frittered away in military conquests and in corporations that just kill death and destruction across the planet. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Alright, I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this here. Alright, guys, you're here with me on an early Saturday morning, so I'm going to thank you guys for being here. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. And I'm going to go and punch my wife in the leg for not controlling that damn dog. I'm joking. Alright, guys, have a good one.